Alrighty, let's see, signal's still up?
Yep, sound great down here.
Great. Yeah, now right now we're talking with Spike O'Dell from WGN fame. Spike, what I'm really interested in is how radio came to you as a child or as a young person. How did that come about?
Well, I always tell the story, and it's on my QRZ page too. When I was a kid, 9 or 10 years old, or actually before that, my dad put a big shortwave radio in my bedroom at night upstairs because there was no place else to put it. So I turned that thing on and played with it and listened to people from all over the world, and I was taken by all those voices from overseas, and I just thought that'd be the coolest thing to be able to throw my voice out over the air and have somebody listen to it, and that's, I guess, kind of what started it all.
Roger, did you have an interest in, well, I know in my case, tearing things up and then fixing them electronically?
I did. I thought that was a very cool thing when I was a kid, to see somebody take a radio apart and have it 115 pieces on the table, put it back together again and have it work. Unfortunately, I wasn't blessed with that ability. I was horrible. So I let somebody else do all the fixing, and I just stuck to the talking.
Roger, and tell me about your first paying job in radio.
My first job in radio was at a little station called WEMO in East Moline, Illinois. I just graduated from a little 6-week broadcast course at a vocation school. They gave you a certificate and a pat on the back, and they said, go get them. Go conquer the world of radio. So I tried to get a job, but everybody wanted somebody with experience. So I watched this little radio station being built in my hometown. My dad actually knew the general manager, so my dad kept saying, go down there, knock on the door. So I did. He wanted experience. So I went back a couple weeks later, and he says, no, we need experience. Come back when you've got some experience under your belt. So I thought, well, I'll never get that job. I listened to it go on the air one night. It was a Friday night. Went on the air about 6 o'clock at night. I listened to it all night long. And I went to bed that night. The next morning at 7:30, the phone rang, and the general manager says, you still want a job on the radio? I said, yeah. He says, if you're here in an hour, you're on the air. Boom! I was there. I went and did my first 8-hour shift, went home happy as a clam, and threw up.
Oh, Roger. Yes, I was going to ask you what the feeling was when you were on the air. I know great exhilaration, but at the same time, you know, you just don't want to mess up, Roger.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And you know, it wasn't my kind of station, if you will. I mean, I was playing Eddie Williams, Perry Como, and, you know, I wanted to play the Beatles, the Stones, but it didn't matter. I was on the air. I was getting some experience. That station also allowed me to, you know, work the boards. I worked the network for a lot of, we carried the St. Louis Cardinals at that time, so I was a board op for that. And after about 7 or 8 months of working there, the guy came to me and he says, Spike, I'm going to have to let you go. And I why? What happened? He said, well, you didn't do anything. He says, we just don't have the money to pay you. We don't have any revenue coming in. And I you know, I thought, well. And then I just asked him, I said, is it okay if I work here for free so I can get some experience? He said, you do that? I said, yeah, I'll work here for free. So he says, well, if you'd like to. So I worked another couple months there for free.
And that is the way it is when you get radio in your blood. You just, you know, I know in my case, I had a little station in, Belglade, Florida, Pahokee, Florida. Things are hokey in Pahokee, but this was a town, I guess, of about 4,000 right in the southern part of Lake Okeechobee, and that's where I started. Well, where did you go after your first station there?
Well, I was working at the factory at that time. I was a security guard. I wore a little uniform like Barney Fife. So on the way to work one day, I had heard they needed a weekend person at a station up the street. So I stopped there on the way just to drop off a tape, and the program director heard my name outside of his office door, and he walked out. He says, "You're Spike O'Dell?" I said, "Yeah." He says, and here I am in my uniform and everything, and my lunch bucket, going to work, dropping him off a tape. And he says, "You're looking for a job?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Can you be on the air tonight?" And I said, well, I get off at 11. He says, good enough. You're on at midnight. So there's that story, too.
It's certainly is opportunity knocking and being ready to accept the challenge, Roger.
Oh, yeah. Just, have audition tape will travel. By the way, the rest of that story from my first job is when I went to work at WGN, my very first day up in Chicago, they show me in my office, and I open the door, and there's a big pile of mail already on the table. Letters and cards of well-wishing and all that stuff. And one of the letters I got was from my first general manager who couldn't afford to pay me. He says, congratulations on your big job at WGN. Included, please find a $100 bill. I need to buy you dinner.
Oh, that's great. That is great. And also it indicates that you don't want to burn any bridges, as you go up the career ladder, because, it is a small world.
Never, ever burn a bridge, because the guy who fired you might be the guy who hires you the next time.
That's right. So now, when you first went to WGN, you were afternoon drive, or how'd that go?
Yeah, the legendary Wally Phillips was cutting back his schedule, and they just hired me to kind of fill in when Wally didn't want to work. Wally could kind of do his own thing. So Wally would work sometimes 2 hours in the afternoon, sometimes 1 hour. And when he didn't want to work, I had to fill in the rest. That's how my career at that station began. Roger,
and you were 13 years on the afternoon shift?
13 years on the afternoon shift until our morning man, Bob Collins, unfortunately was killed in a mid-air plane collision. I actually had the unfortunate job of announcing that on the air one afternoon, and the next morning I was doing his show and continued to do so for 9 years.
Roger, yes. And Steve and Johnny, now I first went, for WGN on a loop antenna. I had a loop antenna oriented just right that I could get WGN on one side and WSB in Atlanta on the other. And I became familiar with Steve and Johnny, and they dearly love you.
For years, in the morning, I would always fill in for Bob anyway when he was on vacation. When I did the afternoon show, when he'd go, I did the morning show. So, forever and ever, I was coming in at 5 in the morning and relieving them. And they still are great friends. Steve, I used to listen to him when he was on WLS, but long before I even knew I was going to be on the radio. He worked at WLS, did the 10 to 2 o'clock in the morning shift, I think is what it was. So. The very first time I ever called a radio station, it was his show. Little did I know we'd be working together.
Roger, yes, a beautiful couple there. Really enjoyed them. And so what did you find the most difficult thing about the life in Chicago and big-time radio?
Well, I remember big-time radio, going from a medium market to, the second or third largest market in the nation. I remember being interviewed for the job by they had all the bosses there, the program director, the assistant, the general manager. They were all there, the sales manager. And I remember the big boss from upstairs on the 19th floor. He was there, and he says, Spike, he says, if you worked here, would you be intimidated? And I thought, what's the right answer here? Well, how do I answer this? Do I be cocky and say no, or what? And I thought for a second, and I said, Yeah, I am a little bit intimidated. He says, good, you should be.
Roger that. I don't know how I would have answered that, frankly. I'd follow in your situation there. But the ratings, live and die by the ratings in a city like that, Roger?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there for a while it was every 3 months you'd get the ratings with the Arbitron, but then towards the end of my career, it was the PPMs, the personal people meters, and I was rated. I mean, I could go back and check my ratings for every hour of the day. Every day I was rated. So when you live and die by a rating point, which is what so many people do, it's a little nerve-wracking sometimes. There's a little pressure, but fortunately, I was never. I was second place in the market. Overall for my time slot, 12 plus, 2 or 3 times over 22 years, but the rest of the time we were always number 1.
Roger that. Now, and also in a market like that, you had engineers that did all the board work, Roger?
Oh yeah, they wouldn't let me touch anything. I would sit there on my hands, and if I scratched my nose, they'd push a button.
Right. The only control you had was a cough button?
I had a cough switch, and I could punch up the people on the phone on the board in front of me. I could go to whatever line I wanted to. So that's the only thing I could do: a cough switch and phone line.
Roger. And what provoked you to decide to retire?
You know, my wife and I, we always wanted to retire when we were age 55 years old. We always said that for years and years, for probably 20 years. So we made a conscious effort when we went to Chicago. And granted, the money was a lot bigger in Chicago than it was in a small town. So we took a lot of that money and invested pretty well, put it in savings accounts, and we got it to the point to where we could actually retire at age 55. The market was bad when I did, but we talked to the money people, and they said, yeah, if you're careful, you can do it. So we did. We pulled the plug. I said, I'm going to retire at 55. I told everybody that for years, and I did.
Super wise decision, man. Leave yourself some time to enjoy life. You know, that's the thing about being on the air. You are responsible for every second that you're on the air, and that kind of stress can really get to you, Roger.
Oh, Roger, yeah, there's times where you don't sleep at night. I tell you when I was always lucky because talking and gabbing and just chitter chatter, I never ran out of anything to say. I went to detention in high school for that, and they ended up paying me money for that. But there were times where you felt the stress. When I went to the morning show, we had a meeting a couple of months after the morning show, and I was told that my morning show, the revenue for that show, was responsible for almost 40% of what money the station makes. I woke up in a cold sweat the next morning. 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I can't be stupid. I can't fail. And that scared me to death. That's when it all kind of sunk in on me.
Roger, I know even today I'll have, I don't call them nightmares, but I'll wake up in the middle of the night or I have dreams about being at a station and trying to find that next piece of music to get ready to put on the air. And unfortunately, I think most of my dreams, they're talk radio stations because I can't find music anywhere.
Yeah, I know what you mean. By the way, W4WGN for identification with KC9VKV.
Roger. We are speaking with the legendary Spike O'Dell from WGN fame, and we're listening to his actual ham radio. Tell me about your ham radio station, Spike.
First job where the guy couldn't pay me. I never got fired. I made it through. I should have been fired 2 or 3 times probably, but I never got fired. And everybody in this business usually does get fired a few times.
Roger. We might have doubled just a little bit there. I was saying we're speaking with the legendary Spike O'Dell from WGN fame. And Spike, tell us a little bit about your ham radio station.
Well, I'm a recent ham. After being retired here for 6 or 7 years, I thought, how come I'm not on a ham radio? I've always wanted to do that. I passed my code when I was a kid, so I went back and got my license about 1.5 years ago. I got my general the first time, and then I went back and got my extra a couple months later. It's very modest here. I'm in an HOA situation, so I can't have a big antenna. I've just got a little 87-foot wire that goes out of my ham shack window over to the top of a tree by the lake, Old Hickory Lake here in Middle Tennessee. And my ground wire is wrapped around a brick and thrown about 50 feet out into the water. I've got an ICOM 7300 that I'm using now. I've also got a Yaesu FTX 1200. I power it up with a ALS 600, and my tuner is a MFJ 962D. So it's pretty modest, but it does a pretty good job for what it is, I think.
Roger. And the microphone you're using now?
The microphone is a Sennheiser 421-2.
Roger, Roger. Well, listen, I appreciate your time, Spike. Did a long time want to speak with you on the air and include you in the QSO segments, Roger?
Roger, hey, yeah. Always good to talk to a fellow radio geek. You know what? We can tell stories for hours. Half of them were lies, but who cares?
Exactly. Spike O'Dell, thank you, sir.
You bet, man. Thank you so much.